willing, it is now time to clear and cleanse the region of these devils. It is now time to show more resistance to the Americans and show our resistance with action, to tell those Yankees to get out of here, get lost.
In the early hours of Friday morning, shortly after arriving at Baghdad International Airport, U.S. missiles killed Soleimani and his close ally, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the deputy head of the Iranian-backed Iraqi militia, Hashd al-Shabi. Other members of the group were also killed in the attack. A drone strike hit their convoy as they left the airport. For Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Soleimani was a trusted confidant, a member of his inner circle. His killing in a targeted attack, the most extreme escalation in tensions between Tehran and Washington in recent years.
Starting our show, talking about the latest killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani and how the action from both sides, Republican and Democrats, and how people justify a killing of a government official on a peaceful mission. I've been and meet our guest today. We have Coleen Rowley. She is a retired FBI special agent and a local legal counsel, and also she was a 9/11 whistleblower. You've been so active as far as anti-war and reaction to the illegal killing of government official in Iraq. Tell us a little bit about the anti-war movement in this country, and the fact, no matter this anti-war movement started a long time ago and stronger in Vietnam, but we still have perpetual wars.
That's right. If you go all the way back to the founding of the United States, and of course the first war to break away from the empire, we fought against a British Empire to get freedom. But at the same time, the United States was fighting the indigenous Native Americans, the Indians, in order to gain territory. Eventually, they fought the Spanish. They fought
Mexican.
They took over Hawaii. They took over the Philippines. The United States has been on an expansionist role, imperialism, for a long, long time. I really only got smart about all of this after 9/11. And so when you
were part of all of this, and you were working for
well,
FBI.
Of course, we all were. We were born into it. We had no choice. Very, very few people, for instance, know the history of World War I. You know, because why? It's
That's a good war.
103 years ago. But when I just looked it up, because I was going to talk about the Espionage Act of 1917, you know what I found out? That Woodrow Wilson pushed to have the...
He was the president at the time.
At the time, he had promised the United States he would not take them to war that Europe was in. And he pushed to have the Espionage Act of 1917 passed just a couple of weeks before he entered. Why? Because he had promised his own supporters that he would not go to war, and he wanted to censor the press. And so the law that was proposed would have contained overt censorship of the press. And that was what Lincoln did during the Civil War. He had his generals ordered to round up editors. So when we talk about, yes, during the Civil War, editors were imprisoned if they criticized Lincoln or the Union.
You sound like Egypt here.
Yeah, so exactly right. So there is this history of powerful people wanting to go to war, lots of other people who see the downside, who see the cost to themselves, who are opposed to it, and even the press. Many times the press. So I'll talk more specifically about post 9/11. We're at 18 and a half years now of war. They call it perpetual war, endless war, long war. And the militarists, the people who write their theses that are at West Point.
Justify it.
When they noticed that during the Vietnam War, okay, so what they were learning from, they learned the lessons of Vietnam. And, you know, after 8-9 years, initially everyone was very much in favor of going to war in Vietnam. The lies and the propaganda worked. JFK initially, then Johnson, and everyone believed it. Everyone was okay with it. You get to about 1967 or 1968, and now people are learning the truth through whistleblowers, through Cronkite. Cronkite actually said this war is, you know, unwinnable. And now people are starting to learn. The military then thinks, you know, people in the military who were drafted get mad. They say, what are we doing? We're just fighting for no reason, and they learn the truth as well. So you see the anti-war movement during Vietnam growing until they ended it. Frankly, the press and the anti-war movement were able to put enough pressure on Nixon to end the war. Now, if you're in the military, if you are a war profiteer defense contractor, you do not want that to happen again. So what are the ways you keep that from happening this time? Number one, you get rid of the draft. And so we have an all-volunteer, which really is a poverty draft that is preying on poor people who really, they say, well, I can make more money in the military than I can working at McDonald's, etc. And they try to get educations that way. Mm-hmm. I don't fault the people who are being sucked into the all-volunteer.
There was a report the other day that the military is recruiting students that they have tons of debts.
Yes.
Going after them.
That's right. Very nefarious ways. One of the ways they recruit actually too is to get people addicted to violent video games. And there's been a lot of blowback from that. The Army used to have little sites where they got young kids in to play violent video games to try to recruit them for the military.
And then they go visit them. Whatever.
And of course, one of the kids that became addicted to violent video games was the Newtown shooter that killed the first graders. So this has had all kinds of costs, but people don't care. And nobody really understands that, because of the propaganda. The other way that they have made war perpetual, I wrote an article called Recipe for Perpetual War. You can Google Coleen Rowley. I co-wrote it, and you can find it. The other way is that we don't pay taxes specifically to pay for the war. Mm-hmm. So we went from, under Bush, $5 trillion of national debt to $10 trillion, about $9-10 trillion. Under Obama, we almost doubled that, from $9-10 trillion.
We got a Peace Prize, a Nobel Peace Prize.
That's right. What a joke. Actually, they want to rescind that Peace Prize now. They've talked about it. 18 to 19 trillion, and now Trump. We are over 23 trillion national debt, heading to 30 trillion debt. And the reason is we aren't paying for the wars. There's no additional taxes. Prior wars, once you raise taxes, guess what? People start thinking, what are we paying all this money for? Mm-hmm. But now we're just tacking it onto the debt. And the very last way that they've made war perpetual is they relied now, that when they started, they had quote unquote boots on the ground in Iraq. But about 4,500 young military people got killed. And same in Afghanistan, a couple thousand.
So drones now.
Now they went to aerial bombing. Not just drones, but Libya was actually, bombed. It was so it's aerial bombing. And when you are bombing from the sky, you don't even see the bodies. You don't see it's just like dropping the nuclear bombs. So these three things now have made war perpetual. And over these 18 and a half years, lots of people were initially against the wars. There were millions of people marching before the Iraq War. Mm-hmm. When I wrote the op-ed that made the front page of the New York Times, there were, quite a few people that agreed with that. That has now slowly diminished over 18 and a half years because nobody sees the costs here. You know what? You're just killing foreigners. I keep writing, we've killed millions.
Brown people.
Yeah, millions of foreigners. And then the refugees and the people drowning in the Mediterranean.
So the problem here, when there is about 4 million people, brown people, been killed since 9/11. Give and take.
And for different reasons too. Like in Yemen, the water supply is poisoned, so people die of disease and starvation,
But it's a cause of war.
And you incite proxies. You incite different religious groups to fight each other. And so sometimes it's not the military killing the people; it's actually the infighting. But who started that infighting?
But they use this and think Shia, Sunni,
That's right.
This and
well,
that.
and inciting it because the United States arms them. So in Syria, the United States was arming even Al-Qaeda-linked people.
My issue with the people here, that they have access to information more than in Egypt or in Saudi Arabia.
They don't, though.
They still support, 80% usually support the war.
The corporate media dominates the message. And they are all across the board. People cite Fox, But it's MSNBC. It's all of the
BBC.
All of the BBC, NPR.
NPR.
I mean, public television. I watch public television at night, and it's really a lot of military. War is the answer every night.
Insidious. then somebody come in your face and say, "We need to kill this guy."
There'll be an expert on, and they're going to be saying, "War is the answer." You know, I just listened to somebody, an expert. General say that killing Soleimani will bring peace and all this. It's just
stability. And he was a bad guy. He was a bad guy. But if we're gonna kill bad guys, we're gonna be a lot of people. A lot of people are gonna get killed.
Everybody's done something wrong.
But you know, you have. Let's go to the last killing of General Soleimani. Now, a lot of spin, a lot of interpretation. And why we did it, and somebody was making a legal case. This guy killed American, this guy, and they use legal interpretation why the American have the right to kill somebody, that he actually killed American, he's about to kill American, and all of that. So where are the legal community when they are kind of have the legal coverage of
Unfortunately, if you read the memos after 9/11, setting up this false pretext for perpetual war, there were dozens of memos written by John Yoo, were not really reviewed by anyone else, except one senior attorney who actually teaches now at St. Thomas, Delahunty. He reviewed some of them. In those memos, he said, since we are now at war, the president has all power. It's imperial war presidency powers. And that trumps international law. So for instance, he can write, we can torture now. I don't care about the Geneva Conventions. He actually wrote that we could end most of the treaties. All of those are in secret memos. Now, no one knew about those because they were all secret. But there's dozens of memos. And I will say one more thing that even affects Americans. Okay, it's more than international law. He actually wrote that constitutional law, for instance, the freedom of the press and the First Amendment, this goes right back to the First World War. He said that First Amendment rights would no longer apply, that we were at war. He wrote these in September of 2000 or early October
say
of
this
2001.
guy's name again, and he's an
John Yoo, Y-O-O.
Okay, I want the guy in St. Thomas.
His name's Delahunty.
And he
signed off on, I don't know if he even read them either, but he signed off on them.
He's teaching in a Catholic
Yes, we protested him years ago. There's a movie out, by the way, will be shown at 4200 Cedar Avenue, which is the Wham office, on Monday, Monday night at 7 o'clock. We're showing The Report. And The Report is the whole story of the staffer who uncovered all of the torture. And he got Feinstein to write this long, thousands of words or pages report.
You know, I always joke, or not joking, but seriously, that there is no money, most of the money in war. War makes money but there is no money from peace. And I think you have an interesting take on that.
Well, that's correct. As Eisenhower warned, the people that were making money from war, the defense, we call them defense, but they're not defense. They are war contractors.
Yeah.
They're war profiteers.
Defense from what?
When they killed General Soleimani, the CEOs of Lockheed and Northrop and Boeing and Raytheon, they made hundreds of thousands of dollars in one day, just because of that. And so whenever
the stock went up?
Their stock went up, and they overnight made so much money. It's incredible. There's articles about it. Overnight they made money. So, of course, that's true. But as a whole, war actually depletes the country's reserves. You know, I don't know the exact figures, but for the cost of sending one soldier to Afghanistan, we could pay for 20 teachers. So it's really economics. If you look at the whole thing, it's actually really depleting, and that's where this $23 trillion of debt now is at, which is making the United States in a very precarious situation. Because if the reserve currency, the dollar,
Social Security,
petrodollar, is able to be defeated, that $23 trillion becomes a huge liability, and our money won't be worth anything, this paper money that we have. that's another reason why the United States is continuing war. It's another reason why they're bolstering Saudi Arabia, even though Saudi Arabia had ties into 9/11, even though they've done, of course, the killing of Khashoggi, all of these, Yemen, I mean, all these terrible
But they
things.
let the woman drive. That's good enough.
One of the reasons why we're siding with Saudi Arabia and, for instance, killing, doing the war in Yemen is because of the petrodollar. And so this, I'm trying to explain how, in a larger sense, war is not good. Another example here is China. China has been able in the past few decades to keep itself out of war. And you see this rise, economic rise, where they can put their money into building roads and education, in terms of all the things that, healthcare even for that matter, all the things that they can put their money into that actually produce more economic power. That they produce more economic power.
And millions of people instead of a few thousand CEOs.
Bombs actually do not produce economic power.
Well, I mean, once you draw a bomb or you tank, that doesn't recycle in an economy.
That's
but
right.
when you
That's
make
exactly
something,
right.
recycle and create
That's exactly right.
values. Well, Coleen, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to come here. Every time I have you here, after the show, I want to go and enlist in the military. And fight.
Between the demonstrators and hecklers. A 3-hour parade takes the demonstrators across the Potomac on their way to the Pentagon. The crowd, estimated at about 50,000 persons, was a loose confederation of some 150 groups and included adults, students, even children.